Now let's go to Trump's plan to terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration and carry out the largest deportation in U.S. history. So do you see any legal barriers to him carrying this out?
I guess, again, there are legal barriers, right? So there is due process in America. You do get your chance to make your case in court and appeal, sometimes appeal to 2 or 3 different courts. But really, I think it's more of a logistical problem, right? So, and again, may or may not have to do with Filipinos because we're not coming to the border in numbers like people from other countries. Like in recent years, we've even seen like Chinese, Indians, Russians, Ukrainians come to the Mexican border to cross into the U.S. And really, you don't really see Filipinos do that because it takes a visa for us to get to Mexico or Canada. I mean, it's not easy for us to just come, but really, what happens is, I guess what I would compare, under Biden, they have priorities. So people that have serious crimes, people that have terrorism, people that, there's something, rather, they're put on a higher priority than someone who's just the average person who's, maybe they overstay their tourist visa, they married a U.S. citizen, they have a couple of kids, that person's a lower priority. Under Trump, everybody's a priority. And the problem is when everybody's a priority, nobody's a priority. So, everybody gets caught up in the net and they may not have the logistics to process all that through. So I guess the goal is to deport people, but I feel like if you don't do it in a targeted way, it's just going to create even more chaos and just people waiting in cases forever.
Mm-hmm. Now that you mentioned, you mentioned how there's the dynamics between Filipinos not necessarily going to the borders, but just to clarify, do you see now that even if we're not, or the Filipinos are not necessarily going towards the borders to try and immigrate into the United States, could they be facing similar treatment from the administration with people who are trying to cross the border? Do you think?
So I think there's a little bit of a difference between the people that are in the U.S. and the people that come to the border.
Yeah.
So if you look at actual statistics, only about 10% of the people that have been placed in removal recently are people who have been living in the U.S. For a long time. Probably like 90% of people are people that come to the border. So again, I guess if they do create like fast track courts and slow track courts, if that's even impossible, there are different ways that people get into the system. But I mean, for example, I have this Filipino guy who originally entered the U.S. in 1990, and right now, 25 years later, we're still fighting his case in court. And I guess there's no end in sight to somebody like that. That it's kind of they're trapped in purgatory. They can't move forward or back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And, I think this plan from Trump to carry out this really big deportation is, it's obviously worrying to the undocumented immigrants. But do you think that documented or naturalized immigrants to the United States have anything to worry about?
I guess I would say it has to do with your immigration history, right? So on almost every form in the U.S. Immigration, it'll ask you to sign under the penalty of perjury that everything you say is true. And if you do happen to lie or mislead the government, that's something that could lead to what they call a permanent bar. So if there is something in your case, when you apply for a green card or citizenship, they can go back and look for it. But I mean, if there is nothing in your case, if everything is true and good, I don't think you have anything to worry about. It's just people that are in the gray area, maybe a little more scared than they would be under somebody who would prioritize like a criminal over just somebody that overstayed their visa. It's a little bit. I think what I would compare it to is how in the Philippines there's no jaywalking laws. You can just walk across the street, right? So to some extent, the government can't chase every person that jaywalks across the street or speeds. And who do they pursue? Do they pursue people that have violent crimes and felonies, or they pursue just everybody who doesn't have legal status? it's a question of, I guess, government priorities, because the government doesn't have resources to deport everybody. I think even if they do, it would take 20, 30, 40 years. And by then, Trump will be long gone, and it will be somebody else sitting in the Oval Office that probably has, who knows who knows what's going to go on next year, let alone 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah. Let's try to imagine like a scenario where, like, I know I've heard of some reports of some documented immigrants who, for example, stay in the same house as undocumented immigrants. So let's imagine a scenario where, like, police come or ICE comes into a house where there are both documented and undocumented Filipino Americans. And, for example, they try to arrest the documented immigrants. Like, as a lawyer, what would you advise? Like, what are their rights in that moment?
Yeah, I guess I would say that, under the U.S. Constitution, everybody that's within the U.S. has rights, even if you're undocumented, even if you don't have legal status. As long as you're a person within the jurisdiction, there is still due process. So I would advise people, obviously, to seek legal counsel, and definitely the biggest thing is, I would say, don't take legal advice from the police. Don't take legal advice from ICE. It's a very basic legal principle. You don't take advice from your enemy. So I would seek, legal counsel, and just tell them, I don't want to talk to you until a lawyer's present, and I don't believe what you're saying. Prove to me that what you're saying,